Hi, thanks for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. I'm your host, Doug Draper with the Denver Transportation Club. And today we have a phenomenal guest with us. We're going to talk about uptime. And we usually talk about systems and processes to keep things up and running. But one thing that we forgot to really bring attention is people, right? That's the catalyst for uptime. And so today's episode, we're going to focus on the people aspect of workforce development and maintaining that uptime. So super excited, really glad to have our guest today. It's Wayne Cascio. He is a Distinguished Professor Emeritus, which means he's officially in retirement mode. He's with the business school at University of Colorado, Denver. And Wayne, I could just spend 10 minutes talking about all your accomplishments over the years, but the cool thing is you've been an author, an award-winning researcher, and this is pretty cool. So most recently, a 2020 recipient, I want to make sure I get this right, so I'm going to read it, of the Ulrich Impact Award for the HR division of the Academy Management for Career Research that ties theory to practical application. I may have butchered that up a little bit.
You got it just fine.
Awesome. So that is a long award for our audience to know you know what you're talking about on this topic. And we can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Sure, Doug, it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, thanks. So we'll just kind of jump into it because when people hear about the pandemic and what's going on in the world, it's almost a dichotomy of a little bit of doom and gloom that every business is really struggling to stay afloat. But on the other side, there are businesses that are thriving during this pandemic, and that may be kind of counterintuitive to what most of our audience would think. And so you have a great perspective on kind of that dichotomy and why that may be. So I think that'd be a great question to start our show. Sure.
Good, Doug. Thank you. The effects of the pandemic have really been uneven, really just causing some industries to fight for survival, and others are booming and can't grow fast enough. And if we look at, for example, some of the ones that are in trouble, airlines is a great example. After the government support ran out on October 1st, they had more than 100,000 layoffs across the airline industry, domestic airline industry in the U.S. Oil is another one because people aren't driving as much. Certainly, the hospitality industry has been very hard hit. Hotels, taking business trips, restaurants, bars. A lot of these are very familiar to your listeners, but there are some that are actually booming. And a good example of that is Zoom, video conferences. In February of this year, they had 10 million daily users. Now it's over 400 million daily users. So movie streaming is another one. Netflix subscribers have been growing like crazy. Amazon Prime Video. Home delivery and e-commerce are big winners. We've seen Amazon absolutely thriving under this. Another is online fitness, personal computers, because more people are connecting from home, working from home, and they need more of those things. So those are just a couple of just a few industries that are struggling and doing well, and others doing well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, whenever you have businesses that are growing and contracting, humans come into play, and you're either growing your workforce or you're shrinking your workforce. And I know that there was some research you were involved with where it was over 4,000 different Fortune 500 companies. And you kind of dialed in with like 6 key factors that leadership needs to look at to make decisions on hiring or letting go some of their workforce. Talk a little bit about those 6 bullet points to our audience.
Sure, I did, Doug. This was cross-disciplinary research with a couple of finance professors, and we looked at 37 years worth of data from the New York Stock Exchange, and it turns out the same 6 factors that forecast when a company will downsize also forecast when they'll upsize. And those 6 factors, the number one most important is company performance. How are you doing? How are you doing now? How did you do last year? The second is what we call managerial foresight. What managers expect to happen going forward? And for that, we looked at whether they were increasing their dividends or decreasing their dividends. A third is the state of the economy, because a well-performing economy discourages downsizing. And as you know, right now with the pandemic, we are not in a well-performing economy, and it encourages downsizing, layoffs, selling off assets. A fifth factor is political uncertainty. And certainly following the election in the United States, we've got a lot of political uncertainty. And that discourages restructuring as well. Another factor is what's going on in your industry. What are your competitors doing? Because firms have a tendency to try to imitate what the best performers in their industries are doing. Right? And the last one is technology. And typically when firms invest in new technology, for example, robots on the floor of a warehouse, you need fewer people, and that encourages downsizing. Mm-hmm. So those are the 6 predictors, and they forecast very accurately who's going to downsize or upsize.
Yeah. Just in listing those 6, in my mind, I was thinking just checking the boxes on all those things. Political uncertainty, check. Challenging economy, check. Excuse me. So that validates the importance of those 6. So
yeah, company performance, industries that are hard hit. Nobody's taking cruises, for example. They've got to lay off people to survive.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess taking a flip to the positive side and focusing on some of the industries that are seeing some success. One of the things that we talked about off air was, kind of about recruitment, retention, and training. The standard procedure for hiring is send out a blast on some websites, take resumes, meet with people face to face, and obviously that's not happening nowadays. So talk about how things have changed and how you recruit, and then after that we can talk a little bit about how you train folks now differently in a remote environment.
Mm-hmm. Recruiting has changed pretty dramatically, especially with the work from home movement now, and we're seeing people do a drive-through recruiting where they might send in online an application and then be invited to come to the workplace, but they never get out of their cars. The recruiters come out to them and interview them, do their job interviews while the candidate is still behind the wheel. That's one thing. But another are virtual job fairs. Instead of going to a job fair that might be run by a university or an employer's council, you can do that online now. And what that's done is really expand the group of people that you can hire from. And so we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing in terms of staffing, obviously more video interviews. That used to be very rare that you would do a video interview and not meet somebody in person. Today, that's becoming common. There's so many career development workshops that used to teach students or job candidates how to interview. And now they've got to really rethink that in terms of how to interview via video, how to interview via video. So we're seeing a lot of that. More and more jobs are being advertised as fully remote jobs. And that's new. We've never seen that before. More companies are trying to streamline the hiring process. And that's probably a good thing, get rid of a lot of, I'll give you a quick example. At Google, it used to take an average of about 12 to 15 interviews to get hired. And Google did a study, and what it found was that if you got the right people in the room doing the interview, once you get beyond 5 interviews, you're not getting any new information. So what they were able to do is reallocate 10,000 hours of engineering staff time away from interviews and back to the kind of work that engineers typically do. Mm-hmm. It's just one quick example of something that's that the pandemic has really forced companies to take a look at the whole hiring process.
Yeah, it's almost like a badge of honor. You think back, well, my company interviews 12 times and my company interviews 15 times, right? But I think you're spot on. I mean, you can talk to a person five, even 3 or 4 times, and you're going to really understand the type of individual that they are. And the one point you brought up that is a true positive is getting access to talent that's not in your backyard,
you bet.
Right? You can find people in different parts of the country or even the world that would be the right fit. And that's the ultimate goal, finding the right fit. So
sure. Yeah, we're seeing for people who work in tech companies more and more move to big cities and into locations where they really want to be, because it doesn't matter where they are for that kind of work. And it's also a retention tool because it gives people a lot more flexibility, and they like that kind of a schedule instead of having to go to work every day on a standard 9 to 5.
Yeah. So here's the next question on that. So we found the right candidate. We met this individual in the car, and we had a handful of interviews, over Zoom and video cast. Now we got to train them, right? That's the one thing that I could see. So all the fun stuff's over. Now we got to get to business and train this individual on their job functions. What type of training procedures have you seen that have evolved? They're a little bit different because we're not touching, we're not seeing anybody. It's virtual. So talk to us about some of the training techniques now.
Yeah. Well, there've been a number of, this is a trend, Dave, that's been happening over the last few years in the sense that we are seeing more and more e-learning and less classroom presentation. Mm-hmm. So companies like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, there's a whole variety of companies that are offering e-learning. But from the employee side, this is what employees want. They want opportunities to keep learning, keep growing, keep developing. And the reason is that they know they're not going to be working for the same company their whole careers, and they want to have up-to-date skills that they can peddle in the marketplace if it becomes necessary. So there's huge demand from the supply side as well as the demand side in terms of for this kind of virtual learning, e-learning training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I could see, you made a fun comment that when I started my career, if you jobbed, bounced around, it was looked down upon. Like, I'm not sure we want to, hire this candidate. He's had 3 or 4 jobs in his career, but almost nowadays, in this day and age, that really shows the entrepreneurial spirit of employees and kind of their willingness to continue to push the envelope for themselves. And that ultimately is going to bring benefit to the organization.
Well, you get an infusion of new ideas, new perspectives. It's not all bad.
Yeah, exactly. So we are talking with Wayne Cascio. He's a professor emeritus at University of Colorado, Denver. And we're talking about leading in a post-pandemic workplace. It's quite a mouthful there, and the topic's pretty amazing. Couple of key words that have bounced around in some of our conversations. One is remote workforce, and another one is contact-free workplace, right? Those are kind of buzzwords. Every industry and every situation likes buzzwords, but those two specifically, talk a little bit about what those actually mean.
Sure. Great question, Doug. First of all, it's important to know what employees want when they get back to work. And when we talk about the contact-free workplace, we all grew up when we met a stranger or we met a new person, we would shake hands, and that's not okay now. We bump elbows, we bump fists, but we don't shake hands anymore. And so we're moving towards contact-free. And that applies, we're seeing it a lot in retail, where the cashier never handles a credit card anymore. It's contact-free. But this is built on the idea of social distancing measures and detailed protocols for cleaning the workplace, keeping workers separate For example, taking temperatures before people come into work. It's part of this contact-free. When we talk about people working remotely, we're saying you don't go to the office that you used to report to or drive to work to every day, and you're working from home or some other location. You know, it used to be a Starbucks that you'd be working from to be working remotely, but today we try to avoid around other people, and that's what the remote work means. Mm-hmm. You know, you're doing it alone, probably from your house.
Yeah. So that begs the next question. This is for all the old school people that are watching our show today, right? So how do I know? So I'm a manager. How do I know that the employee I just hired is doing their job when I can't walk into their office or audit what they're doing? They're telling me they're working. How do I know? And how do I make sure that they're providing value for my company? So what are your thoughts when people say that?
It's a really good question. And, millennials have wanted for years to be judged based on what they produce. They judge me based on my results rather than how much time I spend in the office. And that's the real challenge, especially for managers who have been around for a while that are used to supervising every day in a traditional office environment. It's very hard to shift their mindset from managing based on whether people are at their desks and they look like they're working to managing based on what they produce. So if they're going to be able to do that, they've got to do three things well. The first one is they've got to be crystal clear about what they expect. What does the delivery look like? You know, what do you want? What do I expect? And what do you want me to produce? I need to have a clear idea of that as an employee. The second is, from the management perspective, that person's got to help me be a resource in any way that he or she can to eliminate obstacles to getting my work done. Now, that might mean making sure I get my lunch delivered at home so I don't have to try to take care of that and feed kids and things at lunchtime. It could be as simple as that. But the main thing is the manager needs to be a facilitator and remove obstacles that get in the way of the employee being able to deliver what you want them to do. And once they actually do deliver, the next step is to follow up with rewards right on the spot. Many companies are using spot awards where they might give them a gift certificate. And it could be to an online merchant. For example, these days it would be to an online merchant. It used to be to go to a restaurant. But some kind of reward that says, hey, I really appreciate what you did. You listened, you produced, and here's the reward for doing it. And those are the kinds of things that every manager can do. Be clear about what you want. Try to remove obstacles that get in the way of your people delivering and producing, and then rewarding them when they do deliver and produce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all good points. You know, it's nothing like a pandemic to accelerate trends into warp speed. And what I mean by that is that, we've gone and talked about remote working and how that is. And I think people have slowly adapted it. But I'll tell you what, I think we've leapt forward 5 years in the last 6 months related to the acceptance of that type of work environment. So now that we've just kicked it into warp speed, we're being forced to kind of work and live in a different world. Not all bad. There's a lot of good things that we're talking about. Where do you see things 5 years out? Right, there is going to be some calmness in the storm, so to speak, and there will be people that want to go back in the office. So, talk about what it looks like 5 years out in the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, a good question, and remote work isn't for everybody. Some people just need a lot of structure. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can work from their couch. And so what we expect to see is that it's going to be a hybrid. It'll be a hybrid. More and more people will probably work on mix and match schedules. They might do 2 days in the office and 3 days at home, for example. There will be there are some people that just have to be at work If you're running a retail store, you don't have any choice. You have to have people there. But for millions of other workers, we're going to see continued remote working. Like the idea of being able to live wherever they want and still be able to work for a company, perhaps a big company, without having to move to a major city. So we're going to continue to see that. But we're also going to see some, I'd like to share with you a couple of new job titles that we expect to see.
All right.
One will be a work from home facilitator. Work from home facilitator. There'll be a second act coach. Second act coach. This is for retirees, older people who want to start over again and maybe pursue another line of work. We'll see that. We'll see a director of well-being, and this means not just your physical, but your mental and social and financial as well. And we'll probably see some of that. We'll also, I'll just give you one more.
Yeah.
Distraction prevention coach would be another one. But, all of this stems from the fact that people are not going to go back to working in the same way that they did before the pandemic hit. Many of these changes are going to be for the long term. And we need to, the sooner we adjust to that, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. I think there's a lot of positive value that's come out of the pandemic, and ultimately, effective, happy, and productive employees is what every company wants, and that's going to equate to a very positive bottom line. So.
Sure hope so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. It's been really informative. And it's been a great perspective on what's going out there in the workforce.
Good, Doug.
And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today on Uptime Logistics. Of course, it's brought to you by CAP Logistics, and you can learn all about their business and services at caplogistics.com. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and obviously visit caplogistics.com. Again, Wayne, thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure, Doug.